This is Nobody Yet, episode 16. I'm recording this on March 28th at 11 p.m. exactly on a Friday Eastern time. It's pretty perfect. So, it's been 2 weeks since my last episode, and if you also noticed, it's also been 2 weeks since the episode previous from that. 13, 14, 15, and now 16. We'll have 2 weeks in between each of them. And a big reason for that is that recently I've been really busy. Combination of work, friends, and hobbies. And perhaps the biggest reason is recently there's been a shift in seasons in terms of wrapping up what I was focused on previously and now shifting my focus on something new. And I feel like in between these periods where there's a shift of focus, there's this increase of work or at least increase of effort that needs to be put towards that transition of wrapping something up to my satisfaction and pursuing something new again. And recently it's been just that. So past season, when I think of a quarter or winter, if you will, it was very much actually surprisingly not related to work. Since work was really turbulent, I had to find other places I should put my value. Now, because I'm hyper type A, unfortunately, and I always need to be pursuing anything, but I need to be pursuing something all the time, I began to fixate a lot over fitness. And that was a huge index on what I was indexing on. So I was thinking so much about my powerlifting program, the numbers I'm going to lift, which I talked briefly about in my last episode, between me lifting heavy and like maxing out. And then now I'm kind of on a cool down period where I'm deloading. But I was focusing so much on fitness, so powerlifting, trying to figure out why my sleep was so bad for a long time, trying to drink more water, trying to have a clean diet, just so many things that I had to put my focus on, which shifted my focus away from other things that at least I could worry less about, which the gorilla in the room for me all the time is always work. And because that was turbulent, I had good reason to actually shift away from that. And at least when I think about the podcast and this project, from the start, I made it very clear that this podcast will be something that I really, really want to run. And even though this is not something that I always love doing all the time, to be honest, like when I do these episodes, there's many times where I really don't want to do the episode because I'd rather sleep early or I'd rather do more work. But I know that this is an investment in the future where in the future this is going to be invaluable. So I know I need to sit down, kind of let my emotions just sink in and just eat them up and just do this podcast because I know it's going to be very valuable. And I know when I do all these podcasts, in the end, I'm always super fired up for the next day and for the next week. So making sure I keep persisting with the podcast. But in terms of the cadence, ideally I do this every week, but I'm also not oblivious to how life gets not in the way, but life gets busy. And this podcast was never supposed to be a primary pursuit. It was supposed to be a pursuit on the side, which is able to kind of document as I chase many other things, as it documents my actions and my thoughts and the reflections that I have. So it's actually kind of good as a podcast now. I'm recording it in a bi-weekly cadence. Maybe they'll change again as I get less busy, but currently that's my thought there. It'll probably be weekly or bi-weekly. That's generally what it'll be like going forward. I want to avoid saying it's going to be every 2 weeks for sure, because maybe I want to say something for a week. So I'm leaving it vague like that. And because I'm not a dedicated influencer or anything like that, I feel like I could afford to give shallow promises and deliver on them maybe on a 50% basis and not a full 100%. But so I touched on this a little bit before. The past quarter at work was pretty turbulent, and that made me feel very dejected in many ways. It made me feel really cynical towards work. And a response to cynicism, I feel, could either go two routes. One is kind of like getting myself out of that situation. And there's also implicitly, and there's the route of the what was me mentality of, oh my god, this is happening to me, why is the world so unfair, etc., which I totally felt going through it at the time. But so there's all that where it feels like life is happening to me and I feel powerless. It feels like I don't have any agency. I'm just kind of like going with the current that's dragging me underwater. I feel like that's the first phase. And then there's the phase of having that cynicism, feeling dejected, and feeling like I need to get out of that situation. So that requires a certain amount of activation energy to actually get out of that situation. And that's what I saw in my previous job. I didn't like it so much. I felt it was really boring. I wasn't learning. So it gave me the activation energy to invest a lot of time and effort to get out of that situation. So there's that. And then there's the other avenue between the getting myself out, which was putting value in other things, which I feel like is what the normal person does. I think I would not be mistaken to say that most people probably don't love work. I would assume most people see work as kind of a byproduct or something that they have to do in order to earn money and actually live a life they want. Unfortunately, I don't fall in that bucket, but in some ways, I kind of let myself fall in there temporarily, at least, as I put value in other things. Fitness, friends, hobbies, etc. This podcast actually also writing, but just energy and other things. And when I kind of dive deep into why I felt so dejected at work, I'm starting to see a little bit of the feelings that I felt there were totally validated, but I was not completely hopeless. And it's also important to remember that these feelings are exactly the feelings of why I chose to work at the company in the first place. When I was thinking about recruiting, at the time in like last May or something, as I was kind of looking at what else I want to pursue, I was looking at big tech. Do I want to go in there? Do I want to go into another trading firm? Do I want to go into consulting? I was just thinking about all these different routes. And I came to the conclusion that it'll be most valuable to probably go work at a startup, or at least in somewhere where it's a bit messy. The processes aren't fully defined. The work is not always like linear. Things are a little bit more sketchy in the way they're done. But I want to see what a startup is like. And the whole reason for that is test my hypothesis of whether a startup is actually a good fit for me. But also hopefully to gain some insight into what a startup is actually like and kind of erase some of that mystique that is often around a startup. I feel a startup either go two ways. You hear people who are grinding their ass off, it's really chaotic and nothing's working. Or you kind of hear the people in Forbes or the people who they make biographies about where everything goes well, it's really chaotic, but it's like going well and boom, it goes great and it goes interstellar and rest is history. So it feels like a startup is always somewhere in that range, at least for me as a external viewer of a startup, only through the lenses of media and maybe like light acquaintances. I don't have any close friends that work at startups, so I don't actually know what that looked like. But at least that's what it appeared like. So one reason for looking for different companies, getting out trading, but also like choosing my current company that I'm at is learning what a startup is actually like, what that sense of chaos, what that sense of not definitive processes, what that actually is like. So that's one. Second is volume work. Unlike, I guess, normal people, quote unquote, because I don't know what normal people are actually like. Or actually, I might be normal. I don't know. But unlike, I guess, most people, one thing that I actively look for is a volume of work. I like to, quote unquote, try to drink water out of a oozing fire hydrant. That is kind of how the dean of my university program described engineering science, or like my education, my degree. And in many ways, I think back to my time in university and I think about how much joy I had. Even though I spent so much time just working my face off, studying, doing extracurriculars, recruiting, midterms, problem sets, just everything all the time. And there's like, and perhaps this is me trying to like assign a story or like assign some meaning to it, but it feels like there's a lot of like fondness towards that time. There's a lot of fondness towards working hard and letting my head hit the pillow, knowing that I worked really hard today and I feel very satisfied with my work. And a part of me was looking for that in my new company when I first entered the professional workforce. Part of me was looking for that feeling of, I want the feeling like I'm being crushed, and I want to continuously work and work and work and make progress and chip away, because that's how I know that by me working, it's how I make progress overall, like over my own self and my own skills and my own personality and my own philosophy as it applies to work and about productivity and life lessons. I know that this like constant level of discomfort must be there for me to progress in life, career-wise, but also like just philosophically. And that was something I was looking for when recruiting again after the training firm. The third reason, I think this is a reason that always was really inherent in me throughout high school, university, my first company, and a big reason why I chose my company now, is that there's always this feeling, the back of my head, or maybe not feeling, but there's always this question at the back of my head of, I wonder if I'm a loser. I wonder if I'm a loser. I wonder if I am an underperformer. I wonder if I'm lazy. I wonder if I'm not going to amount to anything in life. And because there's that wonder and inherent like fear of, oh fuck, like I actually might be a loser, or actually like might be the person that I despise. I might be that person that I never wanted to be. There's that fear there. And that fear is part of the reason that always pushes me to chase something that seems so difficult. Because by catching that thing that is difficult, or maybe not catching, but at least running at the same speed of what is difficult to catch, there's some validation, there's some evidence of, yeah, maybe and probably I'm not a loser. But of course, something I'm figuring out, maybe not currently actively, but over the course of life and hopefully as I mature, that is not a horizon that I'm constantly just chasing, but that becomes kind of like a goalpost that I could pass, and then I can set my next goal, which is hopefully a little bit more positive. So that's something that I need to work on as I get more mature. But at least this is me acknowledging that this is something that definitely fuels me, is I wonder if I'm a loser, and have the fear that I actually might be a loser. And because that's the case, I'm going to go gather evidence so I could prove to myself otherwise that I am indeed not a loser. Because if there's no evidence that I'm not a loser, how can I be so sure? So that was also something that I'm figuring out in myself, and a big reason why I chose my company. Now, in the past couple months, it's been turbulent. A lot of managers changes, just really chaotic. And I mentioned previously of kind of like the 3 routes, or 2 routes, but there's kind of like this pre-stage that happens. And the pre-stage that happens is the pessimism and the what was me. Is like, why does it feel like the world is going against me? Why does it feel like I'm so helpless? It just feels like I can't do anything here. And you feel stuck. And I felt stuck in the past seasons, which pushed me to find value in other things. But it felt like a lot of things were happening to me. And it felt like I didn't have the power in order to actively change them. Now, obviously, within this conversation is, well, did you actively try to change it? And the answer would be no, because I put value in other things. So I was okay being powerless, at least in this dimension. But with my other things coming to a wrap, now it's not that I have to, but I actually more actively want to engage with work and trying to figure this thing out. Kind of like take my agency, or take my destiny by my own agency. And a big thing that I had to remember, and this is something that like I intrinsically know, because I say it a lot, and I say it to other people a lot when I'm advising people or I'm talking to people about things. It's Alex Hormozy's quote, "This is what hard feels like." And it's a good frame of when going through difficult things to remember that the thing that you're going through, you didn't think it was supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be hard. You're feeling difficulty. You feel the uncertainty. This is what that hard feels like. And the past couple months has been another reminder of Yeah, you know the reasons why you chose your company? You wanted to start a feeling, you wanted a high volume of work, you want to figure out why you're not a loser. Yeah, this is what those reasons feel like. This is what it feels like to try to validate those reasons, try to figure those things out. This is what working at a startup feels like. You might not have a manager for a long time. They might also be rotating. Your project might not work. It might not make sense. This is what not having processes feels like. The turbulence, the chaos. That's what it feels like. You won't get that at the well-oiled trading firm you're at. But now, at your current setting, you're looking for this. And this is what it feels like. The volume of work you're looking for. Now, admittedly, it didn't pick up that much in the past months, but it's picking up now, just because of turbulence. But now it's picking up much more. And I'm looking at my weekends. I'm looking at my time off from work, and I'm just thinking, I have so much to do. And there's deadlines, and I need to meet those deadlines. This is what the volume of work feels like. It feels like you're drinking water out of a fire hydrant. And that's just not a funny, like, that is, in its vacuum, just not a saying. Like, you could say that, but you actually need to live it. And what that feels like is having thousands of pounds on your shoulders and needing to lift that. It feels like going to bed, maybe satisfied, but knowing that tomorrow there's still more work to be done. It's what it feels like to constantly need things to be done, to constantly work throughout the entire day, throughout weekends, to say no to things. This is what the volume or doing a volume work feels like. And when I think back to university, like, yeah, and there's the glory, and yeah, cool, it was all great, whatever. But a lot of the times, it was me just sitting there at my desk to 2 a.m. working, just to wake up at 8 to go to lecture and then come back home and work again. Now, my life and what is ramping up to is currently not at that stage yet. I'm not sleeping at 2 a.m. yet. I'm sleeping at 12, and I'm not waking up at like 8 to go to lecture yet. I'm waking up at 8 or 9 to go to work. I haven't reached that point yet. And I know that's a point I can reach and I could do well. But this ramping up is what the volume of work feels like. Now the third is figuring out whether or not I'm a loser. The process to figure out something out, and when I say you, I want to clarify that I'm talking to me, kind of like future me, or I guess past me or present me talking to future me. I want to emphasize that when you say you want to figure out that you're not a loser, given that you felt this for so long, since you were a kid, since you were in high school, and that's what pushed you to get out of Ottawa, to choose your major, to push yourself to go into tech and like all these companies, a trading firm. Because you've had this wonder for so long, and the thing that you're figuring out with yourself for so long, it's pretty safe to say that this thing is difficult to figure out. It's not easy. And the difficulty, the humming and the hawing, and the am I going the right direction or am I not? And maybe I am a loser. All those things is what's expected as you try to figure out this conflict, as you try to figure out this uncertainty and this feeling that you're trying to square in your mind. That's what it is. So it's perfectly normal for you to oscillate between euphoria and the fear of things not working out. That's part of the uncertainty that you seeked. So I think the past couple of months has just been a big reminder of the things that I was optimizing for as I was choosing a new position is starting to realize. And this is exactly what the realistic aspect of living it is like. It is not some theoretical thing that would be nice if I worked in a startup. No. This is what it feels like to work at a startup. This is what like that chaos feels like. So I feel like a lot now, and given that now my focus is on work for the next season, it's getting accustomed to it and digging myself deep and just continuously progressing. Is just to keep attacking and just to keep going forward. And something rightfully to acknowledge here as I keep moving forward and to keep remembering is that this difficulty that I experienced the past couple months, that hasn't been a long time. a couple months in the greater aspect of like a career is not that long. Like if I think about how long the normal person works, let's say they start working at 20 and they retire at 65, it's like 45 years. 3 months in the span of 45 years is really not that much time. Even 1 year in that amount of time is not that much time. It's a lot. It feels like a lot of time because I actually haven't worked for that long yet. But in the greater aspect of things, when I read the great biographies of the founders and of the athletes, the amount of work for them to be great isn't on the order of a couple of months. It's on the order of like years, like 3 years. They don't know if it's going to work out. 5 years, maybe it starts working out a little bit, but they're still unsure. Decades. It's a long time. So this 3 months I felt, that's cool. This uncertainty you feel, that's cool. You kind of got over it, that's cool. But that's merely just the beginning over a long journey of uncertainty, of difficulty, of just trying to figure things out and constantly pursuing and being proactive. So that's another thing I like to remind myself of is the time of things. It's going to last a long time. You just have to make sure that you're consistent and you keep moving forward. You often overestimate the amount of work you get done in a day, but you underestimate the amount of work you get in a year. And that similarly extends to you often underestimate the amount of work you could complete in 5 years or a decade. So that's something to remember when moving forward and taking the next step. Now, something that is adjacent to this feeling is kind of now as I start to focus more on work, is kind of thinking about motivations again. I was thinking about, I guess maybe as an aside, I don't like naming motivation outright. By saying motivation, it feels like there's this feeling of, oh my God, I'm going to totally do this. But of course, motivation is very fleeting, right? Just because someone is motivated doesn't mean that they actually stay motivated. And yeah, I guess there's differences in definitions that you could use. Like I know David Goggins uses the motivated as a temporary kind of feeling of pursuit. And he also uses like driven as like that's a constant motivation, I guess, of motivation being short-term and driven being long-term. But now as I switch over to work, I think about how do I keep myself moving forward? How do I make sure I continuously making progress? And this is a mental model that I actually like to use that I'm not sure if anyone came up with. At least I just thought about this for a long time in uni, and I think it's a good frame. So I tend to think of the reasons to pursue something as having a knife being stabbed in me. So imagine if you have a knife that's like stabbed in you. And depending what you're pursuing, this knife is or is not painful. Let's say if you're just in steady state or something, this knife is like not a big knife. It's pretty short. It's not that deep and it's just there. I feel like this knife, for me to actively pursue something for a long time, this knife constantly needs to be twisted. As if like someone, like something is constantly twisting the knife in my gut such that I feel a sense of pain and it feels like I need to keep gripping on tight and to keep pursuing. That's how I frame kind of like, maybe not motivation or driven or whatever, but like dopamine. Like that's what it feels like. It's to have some knife being twisted in my gut that makes me want to keep pressing forward and lean into it. Now, maybe to extend this framework, I feel like there's two ways this knife can be twisted. Growing up in many Asian households, not so much myself, because my parents just didn't really care for me, but a lot of Asian households, I hear that many parents kind of tell their kid to perform. Like they force their kid to perform, they force their kids to get certain grades, go to universities, do hobbies, whatever. And in that sense, it's kind of like some external force that's actively holding on the knife and turning it. For me, it seems like I grip the knife myself as I'm stabbing myself, and I actively turn the knife. So there's kind of two things that's going on here. There's me actively gripping onto the knife myself, which is how I see agency. And there's me actively turning the knife, which is me having the 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 biting down on the mouth guard, if you will, to continuously moving forward at actually what I want to pursue. So that's just a mental model I like to think about in terms of pursuing something, is turning the knife and digging deep and just keep going and just not stopping. And that's a good segue into the next season. So next season coming up, spring, maybe a pseudo quarter or a third, depending on how like you like to think about scheduling out a year or like structuring a year. But at least my next season will be a season of work. It's going to be a lot of work. I'm going to be working a lot. I'm going to have a lot of focus on work. And in some ways, like, I'm excited because it's been a while since I focused on work for just like all of my energy, right? The last time was probably recruiting, where I was working and then I was doing my own work, which is like recruiting. I just classify that as work as well. And I feel like it's been a long time since I had that. And I'm excited to anchor myself there again. And maybe part of this excitement is, for me, I'm also excited to take a new approach to work. And that a new approach this time around is taking the emotion out of the work equation. So through high school, I think through university, I just didn't have like energy to do so. But at least through high school, it felt like when studying for the SATs and writing like the college application essays, it felt like I was in some sort of glorious battle with like a lion, and there was armor and cheering crowds, and it was me in the huge Colosseum in Rome with a knife as I'm trying to like fence and prod and stab this lion that's constantly going against me. And it feels like there's like the sense of glory to it, that in the end of the day, as I come out victorious with the head of the lion covered in blood, I'm like this some sort of warrior that just killed a big task and I'm on to the next conquering. And in many ways, like, that could be one way to approach work. And that could be a perfectly like reasonable way to do so. And maybe this is like me, and I'm going on a tangent, but I'll promise to loop back. Maybe this is me thinking about ego as enemy a lot, where ego as enemy, one lesson is to not tell yourself a story. And of course, to see work like this, to see work as me being some gladiator holding the head of a lion, that's inherently me telling a story of my past self and me telling a story of myself at the current time as I'm doing work. Like I'm like this general who's like doing something glorious as I'm typing on a keyboard, right? So I think it's the application of that ego is the enemy book, but also like being curious about trying to approach work in a new way, such that there's a higher index on output versus like this glorification of the input. And that's taking emotion out of the equation. So instead of feeling like gladiator ready to fight like beasts, now it's trying to be the silent operator who moves with no emotion and just gets done what needs to be done and just keeps going. It's the person that acknowledges that is difficult, but acknowledging that is difficult doesn't have any impact on the actual input being put. Either way, easy or difficult, a lot of input, focused input will be put. And there's no ifs, ands, and buts. It's like, I don't care. I need to do the work, and I'm going to do the work. And this abstraction away from emotion, one part is like I'm actually curious to see what it's like, and I'm curious if it could give me more sustainability, like consistency over like short bursts of intensity. That's like Tim Ferriss quote of intensity produces a lot of progress in the short term. Consistency produces a lot of progress in the long term. Do not sacrifice the former for the latter. So it's the index over consistency over intensity, because consistency is what gives progress over a longer duration, and that is what's more important. So a lot of it is trying to abstract away emotions so that I could have more consistency, and I'm not over indexing on something like intensity, which I could burn out, and then I'm just like sitting around doing nothing for a long time because I'm burned out. So it's trying to figure out how I could get more consistency, and I'm using kind of this experiment or this season as a way to figure out if this approach to work with having no emotions is a way to achieve that consistency. It's to abstract away like the ups and downs, like the variation there could be with emotions. when I'm pretty emotional and I go do work, which has been me in the past, sorry, it feels like there's very high highs where I'm like super motivated. I'm like, yes, let's go, let's go, let's go. But then there's also like very low lows where I feel very sad and I feel melancholic and I feel like I just don't want to do anything. So it's trying to like even out those curves. So maybe if the high highs are 100 and low lows are negative 100, those average out to 0. So it's trying to remove the high highs and remove the low lows, and in hopes of doing so, to get a score of 5, like to get a constant score of 10 or something like that. Is just to try to remove all the swings that I could have. And like part of it does come with like the story I tell myself. It's like because I no longer tell me the story that I'm this victorious person, there's no more shimmer, or like there's no more like glory when it comes to work. Work in itself is not glorious. If I put up a camera, like a security camera in my room that's just pointed to my laptop as I'm working, it would probably be pretty boring footage. It'll probably just be me at my desk just typing. And yeah, maybe the bottle of water beside my desk would change. Like in the morning, it'll be caffeine, and then it'll be a water, and then it'll be like some juice, and then I'll go to the washroom. That's probably like the extent of how exciting work actually gets when I'm recording myself. And when I think about the many great people who've done great things, they probably just did that. Like it was probably just like that for them. It was just very boring for a very long time. And I feel like I don't always fully get that in the biographies. Like in the biographies, you always get the glorious moments, or at least like I say glorious a lot. Take a shot every time I say glorious. You get all the special moments, the points that are worthy of being mentioned. But it's not the moments that are worthy of being mentioned that actually builds worth and skill. It's just those countless nights. It's like the forgettable nights where nothing happens. You're just working. It's the athlete just putting in reps. It's the golf swings, the free throws, the I don't know, like the leg extensions, the squats, the coding, the whatever case studies you have to do. It's those things that produce the skill that makes you do great things. This comes to the quote. I forgot who said it, but it's people who are rewarded in public for what they practice for years in private. And maybe extension from that is the years in private is often very boring, which is why usually no one really does it. So it's acknowledging that and actually like twisting the knife in that direction. If I were to use my analysis analogy, is to twist the knife in that direction and to lean into the emotionless of it all. Is to lean into like the stone face of I'm just gonna do work, and that's it. And of course, then there's the second component of the gloriousness that I thought, or at least like this leaning in that I thought that should just last a couple months. It's not just going to last a couple months. It's going to last for years. For years. Because it takes years to produce something great. Years. So that's a new framework, or at least like state of mind that I'm thinking about in this new season of work and of focusing on work a little bit more. And to wrap up this section, I want to say one of the quotes that I always thought about as a kid. And this is by Eric Thomas, who was the first motivational speaker that I ever listened to when I was like 14. And he was one of the big reasons that set me off onto this path to try to figure out if I'm a loser. So the quote goes, "At the end of your feelings is nothing, but at the end of every principle is a promise." At the end of my feelings is nothing. At the end of every principle is a promise. The feelings I have towards work doesn't really mean anything. Those are just fleeting emotions. The principles that I have about work, that I should work, that I should be disciplined, that I should make progress, and in that progress, I myself become a better person. Those principles surrounding work, those are promises that I must keep to myself. And if I don't keep these promises to myself, how can I trust if anyone else can keep a promise to me? Because evidently, I myself am not trustworthy to myself. So that is what I like to leave it for today as I proceed down, hopefully sleep and get some work in. Now, before I go, there's two passages that I actually want to like highlight and like plug, not because anyone's listening, but like also to remind myself to like read them and probably do like episodes on them later. So there's two things that I'm actually really excited to read. One is High Agency by George Mack. So George Mack is a Substack writer, really good writer, and recently he wrote a really long article. I think it's like 30 minutes of actual like reading and consideration of thought of being high or having high agency, like what having high agency actually means. And he actually like put this like article on a website called highagency.com. Like it's literally like in the URL highagency.com. And I'm like super stoked to like read about this, because if you know anything about me and you read my article about my 20s, three things are really important to me: authenticity, conviction, and agency. I believe in high agency and to enact as much force upon life as you can. And of course, like life happens to you, but I want to be in control of my destiny as much as possible. So I'm actually really excited to read highagency.com because I'm sure there'll be some good frameworks in there to actually help me operationalize what agency actually means and how to actually measure my own agency to actually see whether or not I'm exhibiting high agency at the moment. So that's one. The second is a book by Sahil Bloom, who is also a Substack writer, but I think he's also like just a general writer on X, and he writes on maybe he's like a columnist as well at like newspaper. I don't know, but I just know he's definitely a writer. And he wrote a book that became a New York best-time seller like overnight called 5 Types of Wealth. And I haven't really read the book, so I can't really say what it's about. But under my general understanding, it's classifying and at least highlighting other types of wealth aside from money. So I think money, I read a synopsis, is one of the types of wealth, but there's like 4 more. And all of these are required to actually live a very full and fulfilling life. And for me in general, when I read books, I tend to want to avoid all those self-help books because I read so much as someone in Chicago not like my life, because I was trying to find the holy grail to my life. I was trying to figure out how do I solve my life, and just that's it's solved, right? But of course, as I read so many self-help books, it feels like a lot of self-help books constantly just are saying the same things. They're kind of contradicting each other, and my life has not changed. So I'm actually like not actually implementing anything. So this is actually a self-help book that I want to read. In hopes of it will solidify my understanding of the different types of things that are important in life. I myself already have a similar framework that I often tell my friends about, but it coalesced in the previous 2 years. And there's 3 types of currencies. There's like money as an actual currency, there's time, and there's like mind space. Time, of course, we know, or money we know. Time, of course, is like your calendar, what you're spending on things. Mind space is just peace of mind. It's how much like you're stressing over something. It's what's preventing you from living in the moment. So those are like 3 types of currencies that I was thinking of. So it'll be really exciting to formalize this, hopefully into 5, and actually have a structured way of thinking about it versus just, oh, these are 3 that I think are very important. So this is something I'm also very excited to read. 2 plugs, highagency.com and 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. The first one's by George Mack. But yeah, with that said, that is this episode of Nobody Yet, episode 16. See you next week or next 2 weeks.